What's up, Light Keepers? Today I'm going to teach you about the most overlooked part of impact light shows, and that is strobing. Today we'll go over what is strobing, what makes it so powerful, and I'm going to teach you how to strobe. If you like the content, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. And I'm also running a 50% discount on my program where I go deep into impacts, into really advanced concepts of M1s, M2s, and M3s, and you get direct feedback from myself and the community. So this is only for a limited amount of time for a certain amount of people, and I'll be closing it off and the price is gonna go back up. If this is something you're interested in being a part of and learning more about, go ahead and just click the link down below, and I'm super stoked to have you join the program. Without further ado, let's get right to it. So let's talk about what is strobing. Strobing is the part of the impact light show where you use the third mode of the iNova and you pretty much point it directly at them and murder them. This is a very, very powerful part of the show because the light is extremely bright and it's kind of hard to translate over video, and so that's why a lot of people think that it's either really simple or it's not that cool. But when you actually see strobes in person, your whole perception of light shows is changed, because once you see really good strobes, it melts you unlike any other light show does. And this is the part of the light show that really leaves that impact. The viewer is not just watching the show from afar, but you're getting really close. And this is where they really start to feel the show, because they're no longer seeing it from afar, but it's really close and it's disorienting their senses completely. It's like messing up their brain and all of their senses. And when you start using the peripherals, that's when you just start encapsulating their entire world in your strobe segment. And so this part is really exciting, it's really fun, and it takes a lot of time to do properly. Generally, the strobe segment is used at the end of the show to kind of wrap the show up, but you could always throw strobes, like single strobes or maybe both strobes. You could always throw them within your show too. I know some people also like to start their show with strobes. You could totally do that too. There are really no rules to when to place your strobes. I personally like to keep it at the end so I could hit them with that last surprise and just melt them completely with it. Many think strobing is very easy because they think all you have to do is kind of like point that light somewhere within their face and it'll leave that face melt effect. Strobing is not easy. It requires hours and hours of meticulous practice and placement and attention to detail. And if you spend that time practicing your strobes, it's gonna pay off so huge. Now let's talk about why is strobing so powerful. As we talked about before in the other videos, this iNova light is extremely, extremely bright. This thing is powerful in itself. On the third mode, it has that exact same effect, but it's blinking right in your face. And it's extremely, extremely disorienting when this light is blinding you every 1 second or so. It's kind of like a strobe light at a party. You know those white lights that just that just kind of flicker, and like you see people walk in and it almost looks like a stop motion video where they're like bop 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 like robots. It has a similar effect because the light is flashing on and it's flashing off at a very fast pace. It's similar to a strobe light in the way that it flashes, but these are super close up to their face. And so when you shine a light blinking in their face like this, it causes the pupil to constrict, right? When the light shines in your eye, anytime light shines in your eye, your pupil is gonna constrict because it's taking in less light. When there's less light, like if it's darker, your pupils, they dilate, they get bigger because it needs to take in more light. And so when you're strobing someone like this, it causes a constant constriction and dilation of the pupil. And that constant constricting, dilating, it lets in various amounts of light through their surroundings, And this like fluctuation of the light is really disorienting to the viewer. This completely disorients them and it utterly destroys them because they're not expecting it at all. And remember, impact shows, we want to keep it unexpected. And so when you hit them with these strobes, they're not expecting to just be melted away like that. And so having these Inovas blinking in their eyes, it really keeps them trapped within your hands. You pretty much encapsulate their entire world within your hands. That's why I really love strobing, because then I bring them into my world and I bring them into my domain, and they're trapped and they're stuck and there's nothing they can do. And I have complete control over their visuals and their world in that moment. Let's go into how to strobe. The key to strobing is you want to use small movements that are precise and sharp. Those small sharp details, they make it look like your hands are coming alive and they're speaking to the viewer. Making them really sharp and small really add to the intensity factor. Because remember, impact shows are intense, right? They're very precise, they're very intense because we're leaving an impact on them. And so those small sharp movements, that adds to the overall theme of impacting. Let's say we're impacting someone and we're doing like these soft flowy moves. This stuff also works. You could definitely use it if that's the style you want to go for. But these are not as intense as something like boom, 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 boom. So those small sharp moves are what really pack the punch. It's almost like a creature that's glaring at them, right? The thumbs are just glaring at them, melting them, destroying them. With each blink, it kind of melts them a little bit further. And you want the legs to kind of do the same thing, right? So it's like boom, 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 boom. Right? If these are like destroying them and then the arms are just like woo, 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 like it kind of pulls away from that intensity factor. I mean, this is all style preference, right? You could totally do this if you want, but if you want to keep up with the intensity and the theme of impacting, you want to have those like boom, 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 boom. And that's what's really gonna hit the viewer. So when we place the strobes in their face, how we wanna place it is we wanna point the light directly at them. All right, you wanna point it directly at them and you wanna point it in between their eyes. So right over here. You wanna point it right here so that it's centered and symmetrical. And when you point it right there in between their eyes, they really start to feel the power of it. A lot of times when people strobe, they'll throw their thumbs out like this. They can't really feel that because the lights are not pointed directly at them. When you bring them and you actually point them directly at the viewer, that's when they start to feel it. And so you want to make sure that presentation is pointed at them. And that is so crucial to strobes, and that is so often overlooked. So remember, placement. Placement is everything, right? Point it in between their eyes. You could also do really small detail work, right? So if they're pointed between the eyes, you could shift them over to one eye, or you could shift them over to the other eye, or you could do one hand, right? Shift it over to that eye or shift it over to this eye. There's a lot of small detail work that you could do with the thumbs themselves that can cause further disorientation effects. Now, my favorite thing to do here is creatures, because creatures are the things that speak to them while destroying them and melting them at the same time. And so one that I love to do is this creature right here, where I have the thumbs pointing directly in between their eyes. You know, again, not like this, not like this, not like this. You want them together and pointing directly in between the eyes. And just open, open, close, close, open, open, close, close. And to get it sharp and precise, it takes a lot of time. And I say that a lot because it's true. And I've spent hours and hours practicing strobes to make them really sharp. And I still have a lot more to go. The person that I really take inspiration from is Skittles. Skittles, hands down, has the best strobing that I've ever seen before from any impact lover. His placement is just off the charts. Not only is his thumb placement perfect, but the distance between these two fingers will be perfectly placed. On the Z-axis, the distance from here to here will be perfectly placed for both hands, and it just looks perfectly symmetrical, and that's when the creature really comes alive. So this is a very classic Skittles move, and all he does is kind of open one and close one. When you're strobing them, you want to be really close to their face, right? You want to be super close to their face so that they could feel it. If the strobe lights are way back here, they're not going to feel that. They're not going to feel it. They're not really going to see it. Like, it'll look kind of trippy, but when you get really close, that's when it gets disorienting. Okay, so you want to get super close, but you also want to make sure you have room, right? So they could see your other fingers, right? So you want to find that prime distance where they could both see your thumbs that are melting them, and they could see your other fingers. Because if you're too close, they may not be able to see these other fingers if you're moving them around like this. So you want to find that right distance, get really close, but far enough where they could see the other fingers. Unless you're going only thumbs, then you could get really, really close. Depth perception here is really crucial because you want to have that exact distance. And really here, you can expand way more than just creatures. You could do all sorts of tech, you know, you could do like dials, you could do, I guess this would be a creature, but you could totally do clusters over here. I haven't really seen clusters utilized with strobes as much as they could be. The key really is make sure your clusters are not like the slow ones. I mean, if that's your style choice, then you definitely can. But what I prefer to see is really sharp movements. And so if you're doing clusters, just make sure they're clean and make sure they're precise. But I would love to see more strobes and clusters expanded on. Again, but placement is everything, right? So make sure the thumbs are placed there as you're doing whatever clusters that you like. Dials, same thing. So there are a lot of different pathways that haven't really been used creatively with the strobes yet, and so I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with. Another thing you could do is you could shine the light along a surface to make that surface area bigger, and so you could totally shine the light along the palm like this, and that way it lights up this whole area. You could block their vision so that they can only see that light. And that is the effect that palm lights have. See, palm lights, when you have them on, they shine and the entire palm lights up the hand. And so it gives a really trippy effect, especially when you're blocking their vision and only blinding them with this palm light. So palm lights can look really cool and really intense when you use them with your impact shows or even just regular shows in general. A lot of people also like to use middles, where they'll put like a blinky light on their middle finger and they'll do like some crazy blinding motion like this, or they'll like just hit them with the middles and then hit them with the thumbs and then blind them with the middles, do this stuff right here. That stuff can get really super duper intense, and I've seen people like just murder others with the middles. So it can get really cool and it can get really fun when you're playing with the middles and when you add some palms in there. Just one little pointer here. I see far too often people become too reliant on the middles and too reliant on the palms. So they don't actually work on their strobing concepts, like this stuff over here, right? They just become reliant on using the palms and then using the middles and not really doing anything creative with them. And so me personally, I stopped using the middles, and sometimes I'll take the palms out because I don't want to become too reliant on the other lights. I want to work on my technique. And so once I started taking out the middles and taking out the palms, that's when my strobing stepped up to the next level. And now I could comfortably use palms knowing that my strobes are at a decent level. I have started to become a little too reliant on them recently, and so I'm debating about taking them out entirely so I could work on enhancing my strobing skill. And I recommend you do the same. Don't become too reliant on the middles because it's a crutch that people fall back on and they don't really refine their skill. And we want to be skilled glovers that don't rely on the function of the light to cover our flaws. So now I'm going to give you some tips for your strobes. The number one tip that I can give you is let their eyes breathe. When I first started, I would just keep the strobes there the entire time and do things like this, and I would never let their eyes breathe. I would never pull them back. I would just keep them center the entire time. And one time I was giving my friend a show at EDC, and I gave her like a 2 or 3 minute strobe show. By the end of it, her eyes were just kind of closed and she was like all the way back here. And I could tell that she hadn't really seen the entirety of my show because the strobes were kind of blinding her too much to the point where she couldn't really enjoy them. And what she got was strobe fatigue, where the strobes it's like an intense stimulation on the visual senses. When you have that intense visual stimulation just over and over and over, it loses its power. And so when you let their eyes breathe, you could let their eyes breathe by either pulling them back, you could let them see these other finger lights, do some finger rolls, or do finger rolls like this. Any time that you kind of take the strobe away and you let them kind of mentally reset, it brings that powerful punch the next time you throw the strobe in. And so you want to utilize that space so that you could let them breathe a little bit, so the next time you hit them with the strobes, it packs a really powerful punch. Because you want to make sure that they're processing everything that you're doing. Tip number 2, strobing takes a lot of practice and dedication to those small details. And I know I'm like beating a dead horse right now by saying that over and over, but it's really crucial that you take the time to focus on those minute details where you're making these small motions just over and over. And it can get super boring, but trust me, it'll pay off. Tip number 3, when you go into your strobing segment, you have to mentally calm yourself down. Because when you're going from a high intensity impact show where you're doing like all these crazy like intense moves and you're throwing it and you're doing like this stuff right here, and then you go into a strobing segment, a lot of times your nerves and your emotions are running on high. And so I'll have like shallow breaths where I'm breathing hard, like and I won't be able to focus on doing those small details because my energy levels will be way too high. And so you have to relax yourself, take a deep breath, and really cut your speed in half. Because these are already providing the intensity. You no longer have to move super far back to do this stuff right here. These are melting them as you speak or as you glove, right? And so if you want to go into the small detail movements, you got to really slow yourself down, take a breath, and relax your nerves. And that's very difficult to do after throwing a really high intensity show. And I always have to remind myself to just take a breath. And so when you're going into your strobing segment, be aware. If your energy levels are super high and you notice that you can't do those small detail moves that you've been practicing at home, take a breath and reset. The final tip is if you need inspiration, watch the master himself, Skittles. Nobody has ever come close to the way he has made his hands come alive through his strobes. And it's very difficult to tell over video, but once you start analyzing closely, you start to see how much attention to detail this guy has. And so if you need inspiration, watch his strobing segments and just see how perfectly placed they are and just pick up some things. If you really want some fire strobes, just model Skittles and then branch off of his ideas because he has the best strobes that anyone has ever seen before. And that wraps up the strobing section. Thank you guys for staying and watching. If you enjoyed this, you're gonna love the program where I teach you all the secrets and all the little tips and tricks to just enhance your strobing to the next level. I'll also give you direct feedback on weekly group calls so that we can get you throwing impacts like a master. Again, the link is in the description below. I'm offering a very limited 50% off discount. So I'm super stoked to have you guys join the program. If you're cool with the YouTube videos, that's cool with me. As long as you're learning something, then I am happy. So thank you for watching and go leave an impact on somebody's life.